Welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to What's the Point? I'm your host, Bill Ellis, and today's conversation is about something we're all craving. We may not say it out loud, but what we're craving is trust. My guest today is Chip Webster, who has seen it built, he's seen it broken, he's seen it rebuilt, both in boardrooms and neighborhoods. He's the founder of Unity in Service, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. He's the author of Unity in Service, A Pathway to Responsible Citizenship. His belief is simple but powerful. Unity is built one act of service at a time. Today we're going to explore how that works, why it matters now more than ever, and how you can start right where you are. Is that fair, Chip? Hi, welcome.
I like it. Thank you.
I like it as well. Thank you so much for the gift of your time and for sharing these insights, because they are very, very important. And again, maybe now more than at least in my lifetime. So I could read the bio that I asked you to send, and thank you for doing that. But I think it's a whole lot better just to hear the real version, if you will, from the horse's mouth. So what's the moment that really set you on this path, on this quest for service and unity?
I've been observing this deterioration of trust over a long period of time. I think computers and internet has exacerbated it. And, we don't have meetings eyeball to eyeball. We don't take time to get to know another person. It's just, bam, here's the point, move on. And I believe strongly that trust cannot be built over the internet. You and I have had some conversations. Obviously, the trust level's up, but until you and I have worked shoulder to shoulder, painting a building, building a Habitat for Humanity house, volunteering at a hospital, or what I do a lot of times is pick up trash on the shoreline or plant seagrass with Tampa Bay Watch, I really don't know you. And, will you show up on time? Can I trust you to be working versus sitting under the shade smoking a cigarette, whatever the measurement is. And we're human beings. We are very much tribal pack animals, and we need each other. And so watching companies change the cultures and watching, and then doing 5 loops of the U.S. in my motorhome. For 5 years in a row, we looped, and, you'd be in an RV park and get to know people. And the theme of most conversations was, everything's going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
And, I've said more than once, it's our fault. And people look at me like I have 2 heads. But it is. This is a democracy. If we don't like it, we can change it. And so I guess seeing this devolution or declining of our relationships, and then watching people kind of struggle with how to deal with it, I just realized that the only way we're going to fix it is if we start working together. And I do believe working together on a city project with somebody who has different views, it begins to dissolve and break down the barriers.
I think that's a real important point. A couple of things. First, you talk about us getting to know each other via the internet. And while there's a level of trust, it's not a keen, solid, go all the way trust. But it does speak to the fact that trust has to start somewhere.
Yes, sir.
So what I want to hear your views on is, how does that trust start? And maybe it's intertwined, because it wasn't what you just said, but you mentioned that in your travels around the country that you meet a lot of people, and your quote was, things are going to hell in a handbasket. So it's a matter of 2 questions for you. How do you see building trust from a very rudimentary level to something more deeper and worthwhile? And secondly, how in particular do we do that when everyone's perception is so negative?
I'm going to divert a little bit and then answer your question.
Okay.
I was watching an interview of Bo Jackson. You may remember Bo knows. And he is apparently mentoring young people. And one of the questions he was asked is, how do you know who to mentor? And he said, well, first of all, they have to get off the couch. Yeah. In other words, they have to be doing something already. I have to know that they're alive and wanting to grow versus going and trying to pick them up off the couch and motivate them. They have to be self-motivated. So the way we build trust is first make a decision that you want to be part of the culture, the positive change in the culture. And so get off the couch, turn off the computer, and go out and volunteer. Go do something where you're going to meet people that are a little bit different than you, have different views than you. Allstate Insurance just did a study. I don't know if I sent it to you or not. Bill, if I haven't, I will do it. But about how the deterioration of trust. And I was surprised. I mean, I'd read some of the studies before, but this has confirmed it. Something like 25 or 35% of the people don't even say hello to their neighbors. I mean, it's like, what? I mean, that's just so foreign to me. So just simple little acts. I talk about, I don't know if we'll get to it, about micro-validations versus micro-aggressions. We need to be saying things to people that help them understand we see them as human and acknowledge their humanness. If you did nothing else but walked out of the house this afternoon and went to your local grocery store and helped somebody take a can off the shelf they can't reach, or go to a restaurant or open the door for somebody and say hello, that's better than what we've been doing. And it makes you feel better, and it makes them feel recognized, and makes them feel better.
Those are good points. Let me build on what you said, because you did send me that study, that report, and I have read through it. So there's a whole lot of different ways I can go here, but I'm
Sure.
going to follow directly on what you just said, and that
Right.
is on the small ways that we can connect. And it doesn't take a lot. I think we're so focused on things that we have an interest in. Oftentimes we forget to look around us. But you mentioned helping someone in the supermarket, holding the door, letting someone in traffic, even a little wave. If we have to kind of make a last minute cut in traffic because we've made a mistake or we weren't thinking, even in a wave of acknowledgement to the person that let us in,
Absolutely.
those little things mean a lot. Right? Is that the kind of thing you're talking
Absolutely.
about?
Absolutely. I've, as I think I shared with you on one of our previous conversations, I walk wherever we go. And the extremes are, Deb is from Alexandria, Minnesota. So we spent a few days there, and you walk down the street in Alexandria, Minnesota, and people are friendly and, hi, how are you? And I mean, she hasn't been there in 60 years.
And this is your wife, just for
My wife,
for
Deb.
those listening.
Right. And in fact, we were going to cross a street where there was a stop sign where there wasn't a stop sign. The person didn't have to stop. We were just going to cross. And they stopped to let us go across when they didn't have to. It's just that kind of Minnesota nice. I did a lot of walking in Chula Vista, California, and I'm from California, so I have a soft spot in my heart. And you walk along the San Diego Bay, you look at people and try and engage them. They look the other way. They put on their headphones and they will not engage. And occasionally when you were able to engage somebody, where I was able to engage somebody, they line up like a Christmas tree. Somebody sees me. I'm actually human. We need each other. It is a basic human need, and only we can fulfill it.
I agree with that 100%, and thank you for those examples. I do want to stress that it's not a entire state endorsement or denouncement,
Right.
but your examples are true. There are places where it's very common that people would wave and acknowledge and return that and appreciate it, and others where it's not so much. And there are some cities where I find that might happen more than expected. By example, in Manhattan. I've had a lot of interaction with people in Manhattan just from a wave or even
Mhm.
just stepping aside to let them pass on the sidewalk. And it's very quickly acknowledged and appreciated. You talk about we want to be noticed, we want to be human. And yet the study that you sent shows that so many of us live next door to people and don't know our neighbors. And the study talks about the number of Americans that don't know their neighbors by name and frankly say they don't want to meet anyone new. For whatever reason, I'm not sure I understand. It's just not important to them. So, how do we go about uh, reaching? And again, I don't believe you're talking about changing all of society, but how do we go about um, helping to ignite that connection between humans?
Well, I think having a conversation about it and having people hear us or you or other people on the subject that haven't really thought about it, and that might move the dial for some. Um, I always go back to the Revolutionary War, and when I was growing up, I thought everybody in the United States was for the war, everybody in the colonies was for the war. It turns out about a third of the people were Tories, about a third of the people were sitting on the fence, and about a third of the people mm, were actually for independence and willing to put their lives, their sacred honor, and their fortunes on the line. And so trying to get to everybody won't happen. But what I do believe happens, one of my favorite stories, these two young fish are swimming through the water and next to each other. And this old fish comes by and says, "How's the water?" And the two young fish look at each other and go, "What's water?"
Mm-hmm.
And that's culture. We swim in a culture. And culture is, some people think, well, you can design it or it just happens. Good culture doesn't just happen. It's a conscious effort. When I used to interview CEOs for being in my Vistage group, I actually had a guy say, I've always wanted a culture. When I asked him what his culture was like, I thought, pal, you have one, but good luck. So I think what we're talking about is how do we change it? We do it ourselves and get people who are more comfortable doing it, and eventually it becomes the standard. I can remember living in Ventura, California in elementary school, and every neighbor was very interactive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had the chief of the police, we had the guy my dad, who was a principal, and the guy who ran the buses, and the city engineer across the street, and we would just all talk and say hello. So it's to me, it's hard to believe people don't do that. But the only way to change it is for us to change ourselves. I think Gandhi said, "Be the change you wanted to see in the world."
Mm-hmm. That has been attributed to so many people from Mother Teresa to Gandhi to Oprah. But regardless of who it's attributed to, it's a very valid point. And that is, if we want change, we have to do our part. And it's so often that people say, well, I can't do anything. Well, you can't do anything to stop a war, wish we could. But we can do something like you're talking about on a small basis because you talked about neighbors and neighborhoods. A couple of things. It's when people talk about their neighborhood or the smaller the community gets that they're talking about, the more enthusiastic,
Mhm.
positive, and upbeat they are about it. When they talk about the entire city or the entire state, much less the entire country, things get a lot more negative and a lot less enthusiastic. So I think that trust nationally is low. I also don't believe we can change that by ourselves, but how do you suggest, what does your work suggest, Chip, is the best way to go about doing our part to try to change that?
Well, I think, once again, getting off the couch, making a conscious effort, but go volunteer with an organization like I do Tampa Bay Watch, and go out and do projects together with people there And I'm trying to have this become a national conversation. We're in the beginning of the journey, so who knows where it goes. And everybody says this is a great idea, and most people say it'll never happen. So that sounds like something I should try and do. I believe you turn 18, you graduate from high school, and you go serve the country for a year doing the old CC kind of projects where, building national parks, rebuilding national parks, fixing the roads, but get out of the silo and be with people different from you. And ideal, I would have the program. If you're from St. Louis, you go to New Orleans. If you're from New Orleans, you go to South Dakota, so we have to stop dehumanizing each other. I think what politicians are doing right now and what the media are doing right now is making us more divided, dehumanizing the other side. I listen to politicians say they're going to, we want to kick their butt, or these people are terrible. Stop. I mean, when I was in school many years ago, I remember when somebody became president, the person who lost would say, okay, we're going to support, it's our job as Americans to help this president be successful. Now we're going to fight him to the end. And it's like, what? Wait a minute. Yeah. That's not sustainable. That's not going to work because we're dehumanizing everybody. What you do in war, like in World War II, we dehumanized the Japanese, we dehumanized the Germans so we could fight them. In a democracy, do we really want to dehumanize people who think differently than we do? We're supposed to be compromising with each other.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the dehumanization is so widespread, and it's not just across political parties, and this is not going to become a political conversation, folks listening. It's quite the opposite. The intention is not to have it one party versus the next. The intention is to say, what can we find in common? But the dehumanization of people is a tactic that's been used forever, and it's unfair. I have experience of a good bit of international travel and seeing for myself the reality of different people, different situations, different countries, different cultures versus what I've been told they are is night and day. So jumping back to what you said about electing a president, this is not political. It's been both sides, both parties, all elections. And if we can get that to stop, if we can try to get back together where people, as they say, across the aisle, and it won't happen in politics as quickly as it might happen with someone at the grocery store, someone next door. Is that fair?
That's where it's got to start. And trying to get the current roster of politicians on both sides of the aisle to talk to each other is going to be no easy task. But once again, it goes back to our culture. If we, the regular people who elect these people, start talking about how we need to compromise, how we need to work with each other. If we start, one of the chapters I talk about how to pick your politician that you vote for. First of all, a responsible citizen votes. Only 66% of the people voted for the last presidential election. Maybe you're 68, but the average is around 66. Less than 45% vote in the mid-year, which means that a very small percentage of people are voting Congress and a third of the Senate. So they're not representing the whole country. So we have to get out and vote, and we have to study, at least take time to understand, did this politician that I'm voting for, does he put country ahead of party? When you put party ahead of country, that's what divides us.
Yes.
Then, did they do what they said they were going to do? Do they have integrity? Do they communicate? Do they listen? Those are the things that we need to observe about our politicians and make our decisions. So who we vote for. The other thing is, you may have noticed over the last few years, we totally destroy the competition. I mean, we create lies. We tell them that they rape children and burned houses. I mean, just total lies. So that just creates this hate for each other. And that's not going to be sustainable.
It's It's a situation where generalizations are made without validation, and yet one example might be made and used to an effort to support the bigger picture narrative that they're putting out. And again, this is both sides of the aisle.
Yep.
When I hear reports that people in our national government vote for bills, vote for things to be put into play, and then say, oh, by the way, I didn't even read it, that's as indicative of an issue. And what I heard you saying, and I just want to make sure we point this out, not only do we have the responsibility to vote, we have it, I believe, and I know you agree with me, Chip, the responsibility to do some legitimate homework, research, learning, because what happens all too often is I like this person in this party, either one, so I'm just going to vote for anyone and everyone that's in that party. And that's not sustainable. But so we're maybe getting a little bit more into pointing out the issue. And I want to kind of make sure we swing back to a little bit of finding the answer, if you will. Part of that is this. What you're not saying, and correct me, is that we all have to agree with each other. What I think we have to do is accept that there are different views and different opinions, which does not mean we have to agree with them. But we hopefully can find the respect to say, you believe this, I understand why you're saying that, and I disagree because of this, or I agree 100%. How do you see that?
Well, the term consensus is one that I use when I do a lot of facilitating in corporate strategic planning sessions. And when I first started out in the game, I thought consensus was everybody agreed. Well, good luck with people because the group, goodbye and good luck. So my definition of consensus is developed into I've been heard. I don't agree with all of it, but I agree with a lot of it. We've reached a compromise, but it doesn't violate anybody's values and nobody's going to get hurt. So compromise isn't, I just give you, I'm going to give up all my rights and you do it. No, compromise is we talk about and we come to a place where we go, we can make that work. When I was writing the book, I have, a number of friends who are across the political spectrum, and I was working on something and I sent it out. And one of my friends who has a slightly different view than I do sent me back and he asked all these questions. Like, thank you. That changed the whole nature of what I wrote. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it is just listening. We have this thing called confirmation bias. And if you've read the book, Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me, it's a wonderful book. We just have this paradigm and we think that, unless it totally agrees with me, it's wrong. And that's, no.
There was a time in my life I could have written that book, but then I like to think that I've broadened my thinking and gotten to know better that maybe I don't know as much as I thought I know. And that's part of the point, being open to new ideas. But the other thing is this. I'm sure you have in your experience, both in your travels recently in retirement over the past 5+ years, but also in your business experience. Share with us an example of consensus building where there were two sides on opposite views and they came together with a, quote, compromise that they were able to live with, one that worked and one that maybe didn't work. But also, in your experience, Chip, can you give an example of people getting to know each other and seeing what they have in common and focusing on that as opposed to what we have different? What's your experience there?
In facilitating the groups of the CEOs, I really think that they would all be, really conservative. It was a very diverse political group. And in dealing with certain issues, it would be kind of obvious what, the perspective. But then listening to each other, I think the thing that we don't do is we don't listen to each other. You and I are talking, and if I'm not listening, but I'm hearing enough to know how I'm going to respond to your question. But it's not about really hearing you. So taking the time to really listen and hear and question the answer, tell me more about that. And many times what I observed is once we started peeling back the onion, we were more aligned than we thought. It's just different vocabulary, different experience, and then the paradigms you walk around in our heads. Once we broke down that barrier, you could make progress. I think the strategic planning, we would process issues in the group. And
Chip, let me just very quickly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for the sake of those that may not understand, you mentioned your work in Vistage. Will you take just a minute to explain what Vistage is? Because I think that'll give some better insight into some of the stories you're about to tell.
Sure. Vistage is a series of groups. You have a chair, a local chair, who puts together 15 to 18 non-competing CEOs in a room every month for a period of years. I got members that have been in over 30 years. There's 50-year members. So people stay a long time. It's not a one-time seminar. And then the chair meets with each member between each meeting for what they call a one-to-one. So you really get to know these people really well. And they process issues that cover two basic areas, three. One, how do I make my business better? What are the opportunities that I may take advantage of? Two, what are the barriers I need to deal with and how do I get around them? And then three, the personal, family, kids, anybody. I first started with work in the 60s. You come to work and leave your personal things at home. Well, guess what? If a person shows up, all the person shows up, with and without the personal. So we got into divorces and children that were in trouble and losing children. So it becomes a very tight group where you can talk about anything. It's all confidential. Level of trust and an effective group is extremely high. So we were having a meeting, and this one member, I loved them all, so it's hard to, but like your kids, came in and laid out his strategic plan, and he was just trying to do too much. And in those days, we recorded the issues and then gave the cassette, I'm dating myself, to the members so they could listen to it again. And this guy left thinking, I'm going to quit the group, right? They were mean to me and blah, blah, blah. Then he listened to the tape and he said, you know what? They're right. So there was a case where, the member in the event was hearing one thing, but in reality, it was a completely different message. I don't know if that answers part of that question. And then we've had members who brought things and the group told them, I don't think that's a good idea. And turned out it wasn't a good idea, but they had to do it themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good example because what you've done, Chip, is shown through real world experience, your real world experience, that when people come together with an openness and trust, back to what we started with, some level of trust and transparency, and they're in a safe enough environment like a Vistage group over time will create, I can put my stuff out there without fear of being lambasted in an effort to get different perspective and different insight. And that is, to me, a brilliant example of what you're talking about. It can happen, like you said, with this one person who misinterpreted everything until it took some time. But overall, the premise of Vistage, and correct me because I'm not a member, nor have I been, is basically people sharing their experience, strength, and hope and insights with someone, and we can choose to take it or leave it. But if we're open to learning something new, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I always talk about you're going to school on other people's putts. You're going to see what they do well, and you're going to see what they don't do well. And think about this. I don't know if you ever played tennis, but when you're playing tennis, you can't look at your back swing. Or golf, you shouldn't be looking at your backswing. And what peers can do is look at your backswing and say, yeah, you want to hit it down the middle of the fairway, but you're aimed into the weeds. And that's what real friends do.
Yeah.
And that's,
I've had real friends on the golf course say, I've looked at your swing and you should take up bowling.
hey, look, I shoot in the low 150s for 9 holes, so I understand.
Yeah, so reading someone else's putt, very simply, that's anyone that plays golf and those that don't play golf. If you watch someone else's stroke and see what the ball does, you can learn from that. And it's not going to teach you something perfect, but learning from someone else's experience is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And it can keep us from making even more mistakes. Let me move this on just a little bit and get Chip into generational bridge building. What's your experience on the various generations? The millennials seem to maybe be more active locally. They seem to perhaps be able to bridge younger and older groups. And maybe I'm misguided on that, but I'd love your views.
Well, I can never remember all the different Z's, X's, and Y's, so I just kind of look at multiple decades. What appears to have happened was, I think I'm a baby boomer, leading edge, 46. A lot of our parents who came through the Depression wanted to make it easier on us than it was on themselves. And that was a little bit of a disservice, because it's when you're going through hard times, is pardon me, where you learn. Then it kind of got worse, and with technology, where what are the ones that are just getting out of college and
Let's just call them younger kids,
younger kids,
because I don't know all the designated.
right? So that the moms who would call the teacher and say, you gave my son a B and he needs an A to get into Harvard, aka helicopter moms, were totally emasculating their kids. They have no idea how to get knocked down and get back up. And the generation of not making kids stand up on their own 2 feet, I think has created these problems that we're wrestling with now, because it's give me, give me, give me. Well, what are you going to do for it? I had an occasion to talk to a young high school graduate, and I've got a little experience with success and building people and helping people. I said, what do you want to do? Well, I want to find something that makes me happy. Oh, how are you going to add value? Oh, they don't talk about giving. It goes back to the community service. One of the things that makes community service so great is you're out giving, and you feel better. When I was at Sears and I helped a customer find something in the hardware department to solve a problem, they felt good and I felt good, because I was helping someone progress.
Yeah. So there is a lot of that, and there's a lot of different behavior ingrained at all age levels. And I won't get into examples, although there's a bunch jumping into my head right now, just discussions I've had over the last 3 days. But there again, the question becomes, the helicopter moms and that whole approach has probably had some negative impact, but how do we go about, is there a way to go about getting generations to cross generations to help each other, to try to build more trust, to try to gain more involvement, more volunteering, more commitment?
I'm working on it now. I have as I said, we're on the very early stages of this campaign, but I think a advertising public awareness campaign about getting out of your echo chamber and doing things with people. We know this. I'm sure you've seen the study from Harvard. Started back in the 20s or early 30s. JFK was part of the first group to go through it. What makes people happy? It ain't money. It's not position. It's not power. It's connectedness. People my age who are engaged with people and working with people and have friends are much healthier than those who don't. And that fundamental principle applies to elementary school, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you joined Boy Scouts or Indian Guides or whatever, you were part of something bigger, you know, playing football as far as something bigger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we need. And so if we can help people understand that by getting out of their echo chamber, their silo, talking to their neighbor, volunteering, they will feel better and live longer and be happier.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? The culture will be better. Right now, our national culture is more of a food fight than it is anything else.
That's the nicest way I've heard it put.
We've become the un-United States of America, if you think about it. We're not united. In the chapter in the book about life cycles of democracy, Alexander Tytler, back in the mid-1700s, wrote about the life cycle of democracy. And you start out that you're subservient to whatever, the king, the dictator, and you decide one day, we can overcome this. We're going to fight. And then you fight, and you win, and that winning creates prosperity. People can go and be themselves. It's what the United States did. And we become very creative and create all these things, and then people become more and more comfortable and wealthy, and then you become selfish. It's what we're going through right now. There's a lot of, this guy has a better car than I am. There's something wrong with me. I mean, it's all about stuff. And I'm not sure if you ever heard the S curve on what put in where you start out and you're kind of losing money, and then you work and you start out drinking coffee out of paper cups, then mugs, then China, and then boom, success is the enemy. We were very successful, the greatest country in the history of mankind. And success is the enemy. You probably may have seen that at Anheuser-Busch, I don't know, where you kind of fall off we have to reinvent ourselves. We have to get together and work together to change the culture. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Well, it's great information, and I only asked a question to try to get people with knowledge and insight like yourself to let me know what you're thinking. So it doesn't matter if it answered my question or not. It was good information. So thank you. And again, let me try to tie a couple of things back together, and that is, we talked about, and the research shows that we have more trust in our local community, and the smaller the community, the more trust we have. And the question has become, how do we expand that? How do we take that from local to more national? And what I want to ask you to do, Chip, is give a little deeper dive, because I think I might have kind of gone pretty quickly over your idea of national service, because what you're talking about, I believe, is mandatory national service, not military commitment necessarily, although maybe that would be part of it. Help me understand, help the audience understand more what you're talking about when you mention some form of national service. How would that work?
Can I give a little history?
Sure.
Prior to World War II, there was the CCC and the WPA. It was created because of the Depression. People needed work.
And what do they stand for, please? What are those acronyms?
Civilians Conservation Corps and I can't remember, work program, WPA. But the CCC was the most well-known. And this was a place where, in those days, it was just men. We'd go and work on projects together. And they literally built national parks. One of my favorite experiences was I was in Caldwell, Idaho, and we were on a big reservoir that had been built, and we walked by this little statue. 1937, I think it was, CCC built this reservoir, which made farming possible on the plains outside of Boise. So these were projects that needed to be done to help the country. And people worked together. And then when World War II came, there's a number of people who believe the fact that we had worked together in these projects, we were more equipped and better equipped to fight to defend our freedom because we'd broken down a lot of these barriers. So back to 2025, my strong belief is that we have these confirmation paradigms, whatever you want to call them, in our heads, that if you're from Nebraska, you don't know this. If you're from New York, you don't know that. The flyover states where you live. This is a chance for people in New York to spend some time in Nebraska and people from Nebraska to spend time in New York to learn we all basically want the same thing. And you break down those barriers by working on a project together and seeing that you're part of something bigger than yourself. This country is based on people working together to accomplish something that's bigger than we can do by ourselves. And the respect of the individual, the compromise we talked about. I'm sure if you're out working with somebody in the field, you're going to come to a point where, okay, who has to do what? Well, you do it this time, I'll do it next time, whatever the heavy lifting is. But that series of events, doing that over and over and over, will then break down the barriers that we're experiencing. Those guys from New York aren't so bad. Those people in Nebraska, they're good people. Versus us versus them.
Yeah. The us versus them is so in our face these days. And if we were ever able to get to the point, again, of what I mentioned earlier, of looking for what we have in common, and that's true in political parties, that's true in religions, that's true in cultures. If we just stopped and looked at what we have in common, there's a whole lot more. But again, just to stay on your national service, do you envision this, Chip, as something that would be mandatory national service, say at age, whatever it would be, 17 or 18?
My model is, and I when I wrote the book, there was like 40 pages on it. And when I realized that this is going to evolve over time, I brought it back to a page and a half because all the details. But to me, yes, you turn 18 or graduate from high school. You go to the first for a month or two. So let's call it a boot camp. During the day, maybe you don't have your cell phone all day. You do team building exercises, things that we did in Vistage, similar things where you learn about others, have people tell their stories. Then maybe you go out and clean up a highway. So you work together. And you do that for a month, and then you learn about the politics. Civics would be part of the program. So you learn about what's your responsibility as a citizen, and then maybe after 30 or 60 days, you'd have a chance to choose. You want to go build houses. I want to go work on the roads. I want to work in a hospital. And you'd be given some choices. That might help your career. You do that for 12 months. And then you go to college. A lot of kids do gap years now. When I was in high school, there was some such thing as a gap year. The gap year was Vietnam. So I picked college. But I think it's a way for people to also get some sweat equity. I guess sweat equity. This is our country.
Yeah.
And was it the Air Force general said nobody ever watched to rent a car? I think there's a lot of people who think they're watching or that they're renting the United States. It's not their country.
There's a lot of entitlement. There is. Again, a quick explanation because it's a relatively unknown concept in my experience. A gap year is essentially taking a year off between high school and your next step. Normally, it's referred to, from my understanding, to starting university, but it could be whatever you're doing. And it's a year to try to adjust and transition to almost adulthood to find out what we're doing. So let's talk quickly about your book, Unity and Service. And those of you on YouTube, I'm holding it up. You can get it wherever books are sold.
Amazon only.
Well, that's pretty much wherever books are sold these days. So
Yeah.
Unity and Service from Amazon, and that link will be in the show notes. But more importantly, who do you see holding that book? Who do you see reading this? Who do you see this appealing to? Uh, and I'm gonna segue this into a bigger, deeper question. So apologies, hold tight. Who do you see holding this book, reading it, and being open to it? And conversely, those people who feel that they're too busy, or people that might be too cynical, or people that just feel they're burnt out, or just negative Nellies, how do we get them involved? Is it through the book, or is it from others reading the book? That's a big question. So take it whatever direction you choose.
Well, what a great question. One of the things I enjoy about our conversations is you come up with great questions. So
Thank you.
who will probably pick up the book are people that think, I'm not happy with where it is. Unity and service, that's a concept. We need to be more unified as a nation. So that would be the first interesting topic, unity and service. The second might be somebody who's very frustrated with where we are and trying to figure out, because the pathway to responsible citizenship. Well, what's a responsible citizen look like? So somebody who might want to be defining that. My guess, and I don't know if you had a chance to read my open letter at the beginning of the book, but in essence, I believe it's the moderate liberals, moderate conservatives, moderate independents who feel like we're off track and want us to get back on track and start working together instead of fighting each other. So I think that's the audience, the core audience. Then, as we talked about earlier, culture changes. One of the best definitions of culture is how we treat each other around here. And if we start going back to the micro-validations, we start volunteering more, we start voting more, that becomes part of the culture. What, you didn't vote? We should have 90+% of the people voting.
Yeah.
So it's, with actions speak louder than words, actions create the culture.
We're running up against the time that I've asked you to commit, so I appreciate that. But if you have just a couple more minutes, what I would ask, I've got two things to ask you, and one is, again, I feel like I might have gone through pretty quickly on your micro-affirmations versus microaggressions. Tell us more about that.
Well, you may not like what you hear. I'm actually working on I don't know if you noticed in my book, there's a few poems I've written, little poetry, and I'm working on a poem called Micro-affirmation or micro-validation. We're debating which word is better. I kept hearing, we were talking earlier about kids today, and I heard about kids that were on college campuses, and if somebody came to speak on campus they didn't agree with, they had to protest and then go to a room and hug a puppy. Or if they heard somebody got elected they didn't like, they had to go hug a puppy. Or if somebody mentioned something negative to them, that was an aggression. Well, when I was a kid, maybe you heard this, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I mean, that's a basic premise of getting into mature youth and adulthood. Is if you let simple words drive you crazy, get over it. And so the microaggressions are things that we need to learn to deal with as a human being, as an adult. The microvalidations is a way to look at bringing our culture back together and validating each other and breaking down the barriers of, if you don't vote the way I do, if you don't think the way I do, there's something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. So related to being in a culture, but a different twist from the standpoint of, I forget what the percentage was. Bill, you remember the number of people that feel they're lonely is like 25%, 20%. Well,
if not more.
Yeah. The way to help those people is to validate them by opening the door, by letting them in the traffic, by saying, how you doing today? those are the small things you can do that will have a big ripple effect.
A couple of things. Number one, I'm going to agree with you that the whichever choice of words you use, I'll just say micro niceties. You can choose your word.
Well,
I will challenge you a little bit on something you said.
sure.
Sticks and stones, but words will never hurt me. Get over it. I've come to learn that words can be some of the most devastating, vicious, long-lasting negativities in our lives, and that words, more than anything, are what separate us as opposed to join us. So I think that what you're saying is, I'm just challenging the thought of get over it. I think what you're saying is if we can shift to micro affirmations versus microaggressions, that's going to help because we're all looking for secure attachment. That's what we all want in this world. So, go ahead.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying. You're right. Words can be very hurtful. But I think one of the things that you have to do as an adult is consider the source. And that's part of processing that. So if someone who you don't respect, is a vicious person who says bad things about everybody and they say something bad about you, if you let that gnaw at you, you own that. How you respond. Yes, it hurts. I mean, I can tell you story after story of things that were said to me that hurt, but I decided I can either focus on that or I can focus on what little strengths I have.
Yeah. And we're in agreement on that, Chip. I guess a slight difference in perspective is how do we get there? And I think some people need more assistance in getting there than others. But again, for the sake of time, obviously the show is called What's the Point? If you had to sum it up and all of the work that you've done, what's the point of this work for you? And what's the point of your work for the rest of us?
Well, in today's environment, we've become, as I said earlier, the United States of America, and it's not sustainable. So we have to work in three areas. One is what we talked about earlier on, was voting from a position of study, intelligence. Each person should write their own criteria about how they're going to vote. And I hope number one or two on the list is doing the right thing versus the party, nation first. But think about what are the criteria. Does what they said they're going to do, thinks long term. So the first thing I have to do is, what does it take to be a responsible citizen? Go volunteer, things we talked about. The second then is volunteering, getting out in the community, working with people different than you, making a difference. You will feel better if you make a difference in your community, in your country, guaranteed. And I think you'll live longer. So those two things begin to reunite us. And then third, the reason I'm so much for mandatory service is I look at, there's like 60 countries that have mandatory service. And if you look at their cultures, this is very unscientific, but they're more united than what we are right now. We do have a responsibility as a citizen of a democracy to be engaged and give to that democracy. I think one of the questions we have to ask as a society, what does our country owe us and what do we owe our country? I think John F. Kennedy said really well, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. If that was just the principle, when we're all done with this conversation, I hope it comes through. And my last thing is, if not now, when? If not us, who?
Yeah. Well, I think those are incredible quotes. I think they're very meaningful. I hope that the people who are a little bit younger to have to read that in history books as opposed to having lived it can embrace it and understand it. And I hope those of us that heard it live and in person can re-engage with those thoughts because I think they're very powerful. I thank you again, Chip, for your time and insights today. I appreciate very much your intent. I wish you nothing but luck. Everyone, this is Chip Webster, his book, Unity and Service, and the website and everything about Chip can be found in the show notes. Chip, thank you so much. I appreciate you, my friend, and I look forward to the progress of Unity and Service.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise there is value to be gained in every one. Taking a second to rate, review, and share the show helps make us more discoverable and enables others to find out what's the point. If you'd like to learn more about Bill Ellis and his services, please visit his website, billellis.com. See you next time.